and welcome to Healthy, Fit, and Pain-Free Pittsburgh. I am your host, Ryan Wade, followed and accompanied by Dr. Tyler Bordick.
The doctor is in.
The doctor is in. I didn't mean followed. I meant accompanied. It just came out followed. But today we wanted to come at you with a question that we get a lot from our members, which are primarily, as you may know, people over 40 in their 50s, sometimes 60s, even 70s. And that is a whole mess of confusion around cardiovascular training, or cardio, as they call it.
Who chose this topic?
Not me.
Oh yeah, I guess it was me.
But, Doc, first and foremost, we're going to dive into cardio and its different pieces and how it assists in fat loss. But you want to give us a rundown, and first and foremost, because cardio is a broad, kind of buzzworthy term. I wouldn't call it the most accurate term, but tell us what cardio is.
Sure. So, I mean, since I have a bodybuilding, powerlifting background, I have a different idea of what cardio is. But most people, when they think of cardio, they think of something that burns calories. They look at it as some supplemental way to lose weight because it burns calories. In reality, cardio, which refers to the heart, is originally used to build up the strength of your heart, build up the efficiency of your cardiovascular system, hence cardiovascular exercise, hence cardio. And that's the primary reason of it. It's originally used, for those who are, either athletes or those back in the day who need to be more efficient. Like, cardiovascular exercise helps you to be able to do things longer and better.
Yeah, so it helps you do things longer and better. I think the misconception is most people think about cardio and they just automatically think about running, right? Or they just automatically think about doing something that's painstakingly boring for a very long time that makes you lose your breath.
The elliptical at Planet Fitness.
Yes, or anywhere else.
Yes.
And it's just not true. Cardio does not have to be this marathon, marathon exercise where you are doing just repetitive motion over and over forever. It can be all different types. So, with that said, what are the different types of cardio, Doc? And basically, how are they not created equal?
So, I mean, there are many different types. So without, we talked about this beforehand, without being too sciencey here, there are many different types of cardios. You can go into different goals, whether that's, if you're trying to improve performance, if you're trying to improve your overall endurance. So, the Olympics just ended. And if you look at, like, track and field, perfect example there. Sprinters are doing cardio, and marathon runners are doing cardio. However, two totally different goals. Sprinters have more of a goal to be faster, have more power, and be able to hit a higher RPM before they cross the finish line. Marathon runners, on the other hand, are looking more to, maintain a certain pace for a certain amount of time, to eventually, have higher endurance, higher capacity to outdo their opponents.
And so, not only you can take it out of the context of just the runners, although I think the two parallels are a very good example, but if you look at different sports with similar outputs, like basketball and soccer, right?
Or swimming and cycling.
Yeah. Very similar goals, but different kinds of outputs, because in basketball you have a 24-second shot clock, and that's primarily the amount of time that you're outputting your energy.
Sure.
And so, but in soccer, similar goal, similar game, but no shot clock.
Yeah.
Right? And so, therefore, a lot longer duration of energy expenditure. And so, if you look at the effects, and again, Doc talks about the goals, but if you look at just the simple comparison of the athletes' bodies, you can see the different results that the different types of cardiovascular training bring. Talk about that.
Sure. So, I mean, you can use different sports, like one being like boxing. Boxing, you have guys that go for up to 5 minutes, and they're focused on power. And you can see it. You can see a difference between a heavyweight boxer, someone who's bigger, has more power to put behind it, and someone who is a lightweight, who's a little bit smaller, a little bit more ripped, typically a little bit more conditioned. Or you could even look at a sport like karate. Karate, you don't typically have that. They don't really need that power. They need more speed. So whenever they work on their type of like endurance-based activities, they're more of, can they create speed, but they don't necessarily need the power behind it.
Sure. And so basically the overarching theme here, what we're talking about is basically there are, and we're not going to go into all the sciencey terms again because we want to keep it digestible for you, the listener, but there are really 3 types of quote-unquote cardio conditioning, right? There is high intensity, short duration, moderate intensity, moderate duration, and low intensity, long duration.
Correct.
That's essentially what it is.
Yep.
Right? And so when you are building your cardiovascular health, it's not just that low intensity, long duration that we want to be looking at. These are all different pieces of the puzzle. Can you break down how that works kind of in the body and how it helps us be more efficient in the long game of fitness?
Sure. So if you do, like high intensity, low duration, what this does is, if you've ever heard of like supplements like creatine, that's the big thing of like what creatine does. It helps to get your body to the point where it can generate energy at a really fast pace to help you keep going at that high intensity. However, it is a short duration, and typically that is followed by a longer rest period.
Yeah, in short duration, we're talking
time,
7 to 12 seconds.
Yeah. And that's typically where, tops you're talking 20 seconds if you're really pushing it. And after that, and this is where, the buzzword right now is high intensity training, high intensity interval, HIIT training.
HIIT.
Or even Tabata. Tabata is another one out there.
Yeah.
And a lot of that really is you need to have a high intensity. However, what they kind of screw up is the fact that you actually need a decent amount of time. You need probably like 4 times your amount of time working to actually recover because you need that time for that energy to restore.
Yeah, Tabata and HIIT is one of those topics that whenever a bunch of fitness professionals get together, they're like all holding their coffee cups with their pinkies out, right? Because they're like, haha, HIIT and Tabata, not at that VO2 max, ha 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 ha, right?
Yeah, exactly. Bunch of researchers who have no idea. Anyhow, so with that, you have to really be careful with that because what people will do is they will, for instance, they'll do what they consider high intense interval. And so they'll go and they'll go sprint for 10 seconds and then they'll walk for 10 seconds and they'll sprint again. If you get on like a website or some fitness magazine, they'll tell you, oh, you should do this. It burns fat so much faster. Well, the problem is whenever you do that is now you don't have enough recovery time. So you can't put forth that same intensity for that 10 seconds for the next time. This is typically where people start spinning their wheels.
And that moderate duration, just for comparison's sake, is around 2 minutes, if I recall correctly?
2 to 5, 2 to 5 minutes, which actually segues into that. So for, the moderate intensity, moderate duration, this is going to be, this burns basically the sugar in your muscles if you want to go a little bit more sciencey with that. And so with that, you're looking at doing something like Ryan said, 2 to 5 minutes, followed by around the same amount of recovery time, maybe a little bit less. You're going a little bit less than that. And that, again, that allows time for you to recover so that you're able to put forth the max amount. Now, the recoveries aren't long enough because you don't want your body to recover too much because, again, we're working on one specific system. So that's kind of where so this is where if you've ever gotten on a treadmill or elliptical or a bike, one of the gym that has pre-programmed in there, this is where they have like those hills that you do for a certain amount of time and then it drops for a short amount of time and you go back up into the hills again. This is typically too where you're going to feel burning. Where people are like, oh, I feel that burning in my legs. I feel that burning as I'm doing this. What that is it's actually hydrogen ion, not to get too sciencey, but this builds up in the muscles because you're becoming very acidic, because your body is not, doesn't have the capacity to recover that fast. So you're going to feel that burning, and it's normal to feel that burning. That's not a bad thing. That's just saying that you're doing it right.
Yeah, and when you feel your body starting to buffer that burning feeling for a longer period of time, so you're doing the same workout that you were doing a few weeks ago, but you're not feeling that burning coming at the same time, you know that your cardiovascular training is improving.
Yeah. Exactly. And something else too, while I think about it, if you are at the point, this is not necessarily a mind over matter thing. We like to watch the Rock training videos, or we like to watch these Nike, Rocky mantra things or montage things that we do. And if you get to that point where you're doing these higher intensity exercises and you get to where you can't perform and you really can't go anymore, that's not your mind giving out on you. That's your body literally saying, I don't have enough recovery here. I literally can't do much more. You need to give me a little bit more time before I can do this again.
Yeah, the generalized fitness, cardio program, I think people typically talk about, where they're thinking they're going to have to use mind over matter, is there's too much emphasis, I believe, put on the actual output part and not enough on the recovery part. The recovery part is the part that we should be really emphasizing, because if you start with more than enough recovery and slowly break down the recovery time to keep your intensity and your output similar, you're going to improve, I believe, faster than if you continue to try to push your output.
Sure. Yeah, because to use an example here, so let's say, you have a pitcher throwing a ball, okay, and you want that pitcher to get better, to get faster at pitching. They need to develop the power to do so. Well, what's better for them to develop more power? To be able to throw pitches that are going to be 90 plus miles per hour, or to throw more pitches that are 50 miles per hour? They're not getting that, they're not reaching that peak of performance that they need to.
Right. And so they'll need to, whenever they're starting to reach those higher levels of intensity, need to take longer breaks as they develop their body to be able to withstand that newfound capacity.
Sure. Cool. And then the last one is endurance. And this is typically what you think of when you think of a marathon runner or something, or a cyclist or something like that. And basically, this is where you're keeping, a certain intensity. Now, this intensity needs to be lower too. And this is, I think, a lot of times where people go off is, we want to do more, we want to get more done faster. So we just blow ourselves out of the water and rev our engine up, and then we don't actually tamper with the approximate intensity we need to be. So for endurance, for instance, a good rule of thumb is you should be able to have a conversation while you do it. And if the conversation just starts getting broken up to where you're doing 3 words rest, 3 words rest, that's typically a good area to be in. If you're someone who uses a heart rate monitor, now granted, there's at least a 10% error when you use these, but that's typically going to be your 110 to 110 beats per minute up to 140. And that's where you want to stay in with those. Any higher than that, you're starting to work into that, that anaerobic, we call it, zone, and that's where you don't want to be too much.
Yeah, I've in the years that I've had the training facility, I've never made people go and buy a heart rate monitor to track their cardio improvement. Basically, I've always said, while you're training, just try to have a conversation, and if you can maintain at least a manageable conversation, you're in a good rate, right? If you start to gasp and if you start to huff and puff, you're probably going a little bit too heavy. You're not going to make it to the duration that you want to. You're not going to improve your endurance. Now, if that's not your goal, so be it. But if it is, then that's what we want. It's good. And the main thing I think that people forget about working on cardiovascular endurance is that it's going to improve your overall capacity for all the other types of training that you're doing.
Sure. And along with that too, and something that people discount with endurance type cardiovascular exercise, is it helps with recovery. So in aerobic endurance, it's called that because you are able at that point to distribute more blood throughout the body. And by doing that, and by, and what happens is, where your arteries and your veins meet, which are called your capillaries within your muscles, as that blood supply increases, that expands, that gets bigger. That means more blood to your muscles, and that means better recovery overall. And that's a lot of times, if you're someone, if you're particularly just a weightlifter, a bodybuilder, a power lifter, you can still benefit by doing these things because it's going to help you to recover between workouts. Now, granted, don't be going out and running 10 miles because now you're just confusing your body on what the hell it needs to do, and you're going to mess with performance.
Side note, caution. Muscle confusion is not a thing.
It's not a thing.
Just to get that out of the way.
Yeah. What I mean by that necessarily is if, it's really hard to achieve two goals at the same time. You have to kind of focus on, and we've talked about this before, you have to focus on one thing specifically at a time and get really good with that before you kind of teeter away and go
as
towards
an
another
adult.
goal. Yes.
As an adult. So if you're taking this same lesson and you're saying, oh, Dr. Bordick and Ryan said that you can't get better at two things, and you go and you tell your 12-year-old, that same principle does not apply.
Sure. And even if you're new at this, you can still kind of accomplish two things at once. But once you start getting a little bit more experience, you definitely need to be a little bit more dialed in on what your goals are.
Yes, the more training experience, what we call training age you have, the more focused your training goals need to be, because you have already started to meet the capacity of what your capabilities are in each area, just to a degree in every area. Now, when you're brand new, you're a complete novice, you have much more area to improve overall, and therefore you can make bigger jumps and improvement in multiple places at one time because you started at zero, right? I don't want to tell anybody they're limited in how much they can improve, but there is a genetically predisposed kind of endpoint to where we all can end up in a roundabout fashion, right? So let's say your capacity is 100, right? And at least you're moderately trained and you're at 70, right? Well, now you only have 30 points to improve, as opposed to starting at zero, and now you have 100 points to improve.
Sure. So now let's go on to fat loss. So how do these really go around fat loss? How do how can cardio become a fat loss tool? So like we said first, so if you're going more higher intensity, that's going to help because it's kind of similar to weightlifting. If you do higher intensities, it really requires a lot of your central nervous system. There's a hormonal response. There's a lot of things that come into play. And so your body has to adapt and recover for that. And that typically will lead to recovery post-exercise. And that will create a little bit more of a fat burning effect. It will affect your metabolism, and it will, it'll affect you in that sense. Now, if you decide to go more of like the moderate route, that's going to burn a little bit more calories because you're doing it for a longer time. However, the problem that you have with this is it really starts to mess with you. If you've ever done what we call like an anaerobic workout, if you've ever done one, it burns you the hell out. Any comments with that?
You continue to earn our advisory for foul language on a podcast.
I just used the H word there. I didn't use anything else. But it just completely singes you, and you need a couple days to recover from it. So that's the thing you have to realize whenever you do that type, like a moderate intensity, moderate duration, is you're gonna be tired after.
Yeah, and it's best to be followed up with a low intensity, longer duration bout of training within like 24 hours.
Yeah.
Right, because it's going to help improve your post-exercise soreness. It's going to help improve the shuttling of not going too sciencey, the bad byproducts that make you sore in your body. And it's whenever you do that, it actually improves the whole process overall. As we were talking about, they're different pieces to the same puzzle when we're talking about cardio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then like the endurance, like we talked about, it does help with recovery. It's going to help you be able to do more for longer. So even, again, if you're someone who is a sprint type athlete, or if you're someone who is a weightlifter, it's going to help your body to recover from that stuff that much faster so that you can get more work in.
Yes, and if we just can tip it towards an athlete-centric discussion for one moment, it would be if you are a weightlifter, or you are a power, short-duration, high-intensity athlete, you do want to incorporate elements of that low-intensity, long-duration just very far out from your competitive event, right? You want to continue to improve your rate of recovery. You want to continue to improve your total capacity of work, and so this shouldn't be ignored, but it should be placed in the time of your training year that is furthest away from your competitive event, and you can honestly get a huge long-lasting training effect from doing it anywhere from just like 8 to 12 weeks.
Yeah. And, going back in, if you're looking for fat loss, so, if you're someone who does go to the gym regularly, another problem that you can run into is if you're someone who, let's say you resistance train, you weight train, 4 times a week, 3-4 times a week, and then you throw in another like 3 days of like higher intensity, that's really putting a lot on your body, and it's putting you, I always say, like, puts you in a hole. It's putting you into a hole that you can't recover yourself out of. And so you want to make sure that you are, you use different intensities throughout the week, because if you continuously go at all cylinders, you will eventually burn out and you're not going to be able to make a comeback from it. So those longer duration, low intensity type exercise, endurance type exercise, is good for that because it doesn't really affect your central nervous system a whole lot. It's not going to singe, the energy that you do have in your muscles. It's going to help you on your workout days. It's really just going to help, and plus it can really help with the mind too. It helps to ease the mind. It gets you a little bit more focused and really help with that too.
Yeah, and it does, because whenever we become in that like stressed catabolic state, right? Mm-hmm. The improvement that we've made in the low intensity, longer duration kind of just allows us to breathe more freely, mm-hmm. and it oxygenates our bloodstream, which also helps our mind kind of clear itself out. So there's a lot to be said for the mental effect, but kind of outside the scope of this specific episode.
Sure.
So, but just know that's definitely a benefit of it. But let's put a bow on this thing, Doc. I'll give you my one takeaway, and if you want to kind of add 2 more. Mm-hmm. My one takeaway is that whenever you're training for cardio and you're specifically looking for increased fat loss or fitness, remember that cardio is the sum of 3 puzzle pieces, right? And they all are working together to put together the same picture. So you have the low intensity long duration, the moderate intensity moderate duration, the high intensity short duration, and we want to try to train all 3 of those. Now, we talked about kind of the timing. The high intensity short duration is like 7 to 12 as a max of 20 seconds. Moderate is a I'm blanking, help me.
2 to 5 minutes.
2 to 5 minutes, okay. And the low intensity short duration is basically going over that 5-minute threshold, but up until hours and hours and hours. Doc, what you got?
So the one takeaway I'll definitely give is, so if you're looking at, okay, Doc, how in the heck do I put this into my week?
We've got a long way to go.
How do I put this into my week? So I typically recommend, if you're going to do cardio, 2 to 5 times a week is good. 2 being if you're looking to just maintain your fitness throughout. Like if you're someone who wants to put on a little bit of muscle, a little bit of strength, but you don't want to look like you just poured out of the bar every day, then 2 days a week is good for that. And that can kind of be a mix of all the ones that we talked about. Now, if you're someone who is actually doing an endurance event, like you're doing a 5K or you're doing a triathlon or something like that, then that 5 is probably going to be good for you. But if you're not doing that, then you really have to watch doing that 5 times a week, because again, this is a cliche example, but the sprinter, the marathoner, who would you rather look like? If you want to look like the marathoner, then you just do more cardio. If you're looking for fat loss, it's going to be kind of in that mid-range there. 3 times a week should be good for cardio. Again, if you really want to do more, then you really better go that low-intensity, longer duration style. So, cool. And the other one too is just remember whenever you're putting cardio into your program, ask yourself why you're doing it, what your goal is. If your goal is to improve performance, we talked about that earlier. If your goal is to lose body fat, we talked about that. If your goal is to have a higher capacity, we talked about that. Don't just aimlessly throw cardio into your program because you look at Chris Hemsworth's program and it said that he did this much cardio, because we are not Chris Hemsworth. We'd like to be, but we're not. No.
So all good points. And basically, so again, there's a lot to consider in your cardio. Don't think that it's just, one magic event. If you keep doing it, it's gonna get you every result that you ever want in the world. Everybody always wants the catch-all. I always fall back. There's a brilliant guy in the industry named Mike Ranfone. He got the question, what is the best type of exercise or cardio for fat loss at an event that I was at. And Mike's a brilliant guy, and I love his answer. His answer was to train in a lactic state. So that means train until you feel like your muscles are burning up, keep that feeling for as long as you can, and then recover for as long as it takes to not feel that way, and then do it again.
Yep.
I like that answer.
That's a good answer.
So, so if you want your catch-all, there it is. Again, Doc, you got anything else?
No, I'm good.
No? All right. Well, we are, I'm Ryan for Dr. Tyler Bordick. This is Healthy, Fit, and Pain-Free Pittsburgh, brought to you by Inner Strength Physio Fitness Athletics, located in Coriopolis, a.k.a. Robinson Township, Pennsylvania, off the exit of Montour Run Road, where we specialize in helping people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s, get back to making positive lifestyle change permanent in their fitness, their nutrition, stress management, sleep management, pain management, self-belief, motivation, and accountability. These are all pieces to one big puzzle. Just like your cardio, one can't be ignored and expect all the rest of them to follow forever. We want to make that healthy lifestyle sustainable for you, simple for you, something that you can maintain, get results, get that fat loss, get that strength up, get your mobility back, get back to independent living, active activities that you love with the people that you love, and make it happen for the rest of your life. For Doc, I'm Ryan. Stay healthy, fit, and pain-free, Pittsburgh.
Doc out.